time for this nation to take a clearly leading role in space achievement, which in many ways may hold the key to our future on Earth.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Today is a day for mourning and remembering. Nancy and I are pained to the core by the tragedy of the Shuttle Challenger.
The following program may contain coarse language, adult themes, and bad attempts at humor. Listener discretion is advised.
What is President Trump's goal? What is his vision? He wants to put an American flag on Mars.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
I am JEFF, known as A Cosmic Bard, over on X, and this is the Lost Wanderer podcast for January 11th, 2026, produced live from Listening Post Studios and simulcast on KLRN Radio. Coming to you from the ACS Serenade Observatory, orbiting high above the night side of the Earth. Top story tonight. The United States Senate confirmed Jared Isaacman as administrator of NASA on December 17th by a vote of 67 to 30. Confirmation ended a stretch where the agency had been operating without any sort of permanent administrator, relying instead on interim leadership while the nomination process stalled, reset, and then resumed. That confirmation was not the first attempt to put Isaacman into the role. Earlier in the year, he had been nominated, and that nomination did not reach a vote on the Senate floor. It was withdrawn before confirmation because I think someone got their panties in a bunch. There was no rejection. There was no real dramatic vote against him. The process simply stopped. Now, this pause matters because it changes how this appointment should have been understood. Isaacman was not turned away, he was simply reconsidered. When the nomination returned later in the year, it did so deliberately in a different political and operational environment than the one it left at the time. And by the time the second nomination moved forward, NASA was under greater pressure in several areas at once. The number of commercial crew flights were no longer transitional experiments. They had and have become routine operations. Human spaceflight oversight was receiving sharper scrutiny, especially around how safety concerns were raised, evaluated, and communicated. The agency was managing an aging space station, multiple commercial partnerships, and a public that had been more attentive to how risk decisions are being made. During the renewed confirmation process, senators asked questions that reflected the environment. They asked about experience. They asked about independence. They asked how a leader coming from outside NASA's traditional internal structure would manage an agency where schedule pressure and safety margins are always in tension. And I say probably better because he's a private individual, runs businesses, probably had to make more decisions. And the final vote answered those questions politically. 67 votes in favor indicates that there was some, broader support across party lines. 30 votes against kind of showed a little bit skepticism remaining, but I think that was more anti-president than it was anti-Jared. That said, Isaacman does not arrive with universal agreement behind him, but he does arrive with legitimacy. He is not an interim solution. He is not just a simple caretaker. He arrives with a confirmed mandate after a process that stopped, restarted, and concluded. Now, it's important to note Isaacman's background is different from most recent administrators. He did not spend decades rotating through NASA centers, getting caught up in the bureaucratic bullshit. He did not rise through civil service ranks. His experience with spaceflight is a little more recent, and it is definitely external. But unlike other administrators, though some do apply here, he has flown to orbit. He has funded missions. He has worked directly with the commercial system NASA now depends on to put people into space. That background places him closer to operational realities of modern human spaceflight than, let's face it, any of the individuals who came before him. Now, under normal circumstances, that difference alone would have defined the opening months of his tenure. There would have been time for, internal briefings, alignment meetings, and careful onboarding and welcome to the new position. There would have been room to outline his priorities, assess programs, and settle into a role before, any major event forced the agency into public view. NASA, however, did not get that time. Within days of Isaacman's confirmation, NASA acknowledged a medical issue involving one of the astronauts aboard the ISS. The first public indication was limited. A planned spacewalk was simply postponed. Then NASA cited a medical concern and offered no further details. No emergency was declared at that time. No return time label was even announced. Now, for people familiar with station operations, a postponement was meaningful. Spacewalks are planned far in advance. They are scheduled around crew health, vehicle readiness, orbital mechanics, and station power constraints. They're not delayed lightly. When a spacewalk is postponed for medical reasons, it signals the crew's health has moved beyond routine monitoring and has now entered operational decision-making. Following that postponement, NASA began evaluating options. Those evaluations involved flight surgeons, mission managers, SpaceX, and international partners. The central question was whether or not the astronaut was in immediate danger. NASA stated clearly that the astronaut was quote-unquote stable. The question was now continued presence in the orbit was, appropriate given the limits of medical capability aboard the station. For those that do not know, these limits are not a theoretical limit. Astronauts do receive extensive medical training, and the station carries equipment for monitoring and stabilization. What the ISS does not have is advanced diagnostic capability. There is no CT scanner, no MRI, no comprehensive laboratory analysis for at least this purpose. There is no way to conduct prolonged diagnostic evaluation under, the situation. When NASA determines that those limits have been reached, the only responsible option is to simply return. And that's what NASA has announced, that it will be bringing SpaceX Crew 11 home early. This would be the first planned medical evacuation from the ISS in more than 2 decades of continuous human occupation. And the agency was deliberate in its language. It did not frame the decision as an emergency descent. It did not cite a vehicle problem or a system malfunction. It instead emphasized stability, caution, and the need to further evaluate on terra firma. Now, for those that do not know, Crew 11 consists of 4 astronauts: NASA astronaut Zana Cardman and Mike Finke, Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Kimiya U, and Russian cosmonaut Oleg Platonov. They launched in early August for what was planned for a standard 6-month mission. Now, NASA and SpaceX set a target of no earlier than 5 p.m. Eastern Time on January 14th for undocking, with splashdown expected early the following morning, depending on weather and recovery conditions. The mechanics of the routine are, for now, routine. Crew Dragon is certified for this kind of operation. Recovery teams are positioned, and the unusual element is not the return itself, but just simply the reason for it. Now, NASA is returning the entire crew, not just a single astronaut. That decision reflects Honestly, it reflects on how commercial crew missions are certified and operated. Partial crew returns are not really supported in this configuration. Attempting to extract a single astronaut while leaving the rest of the crew on orbit would introduce unnecessary complexity and risk rather than actually reducing it. Returning the full crew together is the safest and simplest option. And ending this mission early also avoids leaving astronauts aboard the station without their assigned spacecraft. Remember, every ISS crew increment is planned out around specific vehicles, handover periods, and operational roles. Removing one crew member without adjusting the rest would complicate operations far more than I think the average person understands. Sadly, once Crew 11 departs, the ISS will operate with a reduced crew. NASA has stated clearly that the station remains safe and stable in this configuration. Core systems remain automated. Ground teams continue to monitor and support operations continuously. Life support, power generation, and thermal control are not compromised. What simply changes is the current capacity. Now, with fewer astronauts aboard, fewer tasks can be performed simultaneously, and you also have to shift maintenance to now be top priority. Yes, some scientific experiments will continue, especially those that can run autonomously or require minimal crew intervention. Other experiments may just have to be paused. Planned spacewalks, well, they're probably going to be delayed. But it's important to note this is not a failure state. It is a constrained operational posture. Reduced crew also means reduced margin. When unexpected issues arise, there are fewer people available to respond at a given time. Once again, this does not make the station unsafe, but it does require more careful scheduling and more conservative decision making. NASA has managed to reduce crew scenarios before, typically during planned crew rotations. The fact that this was not a predetermined situation just makes it a little more of a scarier situation. The evacuation also unfolds against the backdrop of heightened scrutiny over NASA's human spaceflight decision making, though. Shortly before the evacuation announcement, an independent safety advisory panel criticized how NASA has handled earlier issues, including something we covered here frequently, aspects of the Starliner program. That criticism focused on process rather than a single failure, how risks are even identified, how concerns are evaluated, and how decisions are most importantly communicated to one another. Now, the context doesn't mean the evacuation decision is reactive. It does mean the decision will be examined carefully and appropriately so. Decisions involving astronaut health should withstand scrutiny, particularly when they set precedents like this one will. For a new administrator, this situation does not function as a symbolic first challenge because there is no grace period here. The agency is already executing a complex decision involving astronauts' health, coordination, and reliance on commercial crew systems. Isaacman did not initiate the evacuation, but he inherits the responsibility for how the agency carries it out and how it will communicate about it. The role of NASA administrator does not include making individual medical calls. Those decisions are made by flight surgeons and mission managers. What the administrator controls is organizational posture, how conservative the agency is when uncertainty exists, how maybe schedule pressure is weighed against safety, how decisions are, explained to the bank, Congress, partners, and the public. This moment defines that posture immediately. The ISS is often discussed as a symbol of cooperation, continuity, and endurance. In moments like this, the symbolism recedes and the operational reality becomes clear. Human spaceflight is constrained. It's very complex. It operates within limits that cannot simply be negotiated away on a whim. And sometimes the correct decision is not to press forward, but to bring people home. And Jared Isaacman begins his tenure at NASA with exactly that decision already in progress. Not some future test, not a hypothetical scenario. Hey, Mr. Admin, what will you do in this? No, this is full-blown active situation involving real people, real systems, and real limits. So, Mr. Isaacman, welcome to NASA. Now, with that said, this week, the direction of American space policy did become a little clear, not because everyone agreed, but because competing priorities were put down on paper. Congress has rejected proposed deep cuts to NASA's budget and instead advanced a funding level of $24.4 billion with a B dollars for the coming fiscal year. That figure represents a push to keep NASA's core science, exploration, and human spaceflight programs intact after concerns that reducing funding would delay or cancel ongoing missions. The rejected proposal would have significantly reduced funding for science directorates, planetary exploration, and research programs tied to Earth science and astrophysics, among also others that could probably be afforded to be cut. Those cuts did raise alarms among some lawmakers, scientists, and industry partners who warned that some long-term missions, including in particular telescope operations, planetary probes, and technological development, could be disrupted or even worse, permanently have to be shelved. Now, Congress's counterproposal does not expand NASA dramatically. Instead, it stabilizes existing programs. It keeps Artemis hardware development moving, preserves funding for science missions already in flight or nearing launch, and avoids workforce contraction at NASA centers across the country, which may or may not be a good thing depending on which centers and what offices are remaining open. But that's a personal issue with me. Anyway, at the same time, space policy from the executive branch is moving in a different direction. President Trump has signed a sweeping executive order aiming at reinforcing American dominance in space. The order emphasized national security, protection of U.S. space assets, and the prevention of adversaries from gaining strategic advantage in orbit and beyond. The language of the order frames space as a contested domain, which it is. Satellites are described as critical infrastructure, which they are. Orbital systems are treated as strategic assets. Yep, they are. And the document aligns closely with existing United States Space Force doctrine, which views space not only as a scientific frontier, but as an operational environment tied directly to defense and deterrence. Because, say it with me, it is. Now, taken together, these two actions reveal split emphasis rather than contradiction. Congress is signaling the NASA scientific and exploratory role remains valuable and worthy of protecting, outside of a few that, once again, I will not argue on this episode. And the executive order signals that space superiority, resilience, and control are now central to national strategy. And say it with me one more time, because it is. One preserves exploration, the other prioritizes security. And NASA is operating between these two different pressures. The agency does not control military space policy. However, it depends on political stability to execute missions that unfold over decades rather than election cycles. Budget certainty matters because spacecraft are not built quickly unless you're Elon, and interruptions often cost more than steady funding. Now, none of this changes the physics of orbit, things such as launch windows or even deep space navigation in all practices here. It changes how the United States allocates attention, resources, and authority above the atmosphere. For now, it seems NASA's missions will remain largely funded, some for the good, some for the bad, and science programs will continue, some for the good, some for the bad, and launch schedules will remain active, and at the same time, space now is increasingly spoken about in strategic terms rather than exploratory ones because, and say it with me, it should be. And the good thing is it is likely where this will actually remain for the foreseeable future. Now, not everything is golden with NASA. No, we have talked many times on this show in the past And it's reared its wonderful, ugly head again tonight's episode. A NASA safety panel has issued a blunt assessment on the recent Boeing Starliner incident, concluding that the agency sucks and should have treated the event with greater urgency and seriousness. The review comes from Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel, an independent or so called body that reports directly to NASA leadership in Congress. Its role is allegedly not political. Its job is to identify risk before risk becomes failure. Now, according to the panel, the problems encountered during Starliner's crewed missions were not isolated anomalies. They were indicators of deeper system level issues that warranted stronger immediate response. You don't say. Good God, how many months did I harp on that? During the mission, Starliner experienced multiple propulsion system failures, including malfunctioning thrusters on the service module. These thrusters are essential for precise maneuvering, docking, and deorbit operations. While yes, the spacecraft ultimately docked with the ISS, the panel emphasized that success in this area does not erase the underlying hazards. Plural. The concern was not that something went wrong, and it did. It's that concern was how close the mission came to losing options. The panel stated that NASA appeared to accept explanations and mitigations way too quickly, without fully interrogating whether the failures represented a broader design or reliability problem. You think? In safety engineering, especially human spaceflight, unresolved ambiguity is treated as risk. Not, it'll be okay. Not some sort of weird reassurance that everything's gonna be all right. No. The review also raised concerns about decision-making culture. NASA has spent decades rebuilding trust and safety processes following some unfortunate past disasters. The panel warned that minimizing anomalies, even when missions succeed, can lead to normalization of deviance, a pattern where repeated issues are reclassified as acceptable simply because something didn't go kablooey. Starliner has had a long and troubled development in history. This is known. The program has experienced scheduled slips, software errors, uncrewed test failures, and repeated redesigns. It exists alongside SpaceX Crew Dragon as part of NASA's Commercial Crew program, intended to, of course, provide redundancy in competition. I've yet to see the redundancy in competition. And that said, redundancy only works if both systems are meeting the same safety bar. Now, the panel stressed that Boeing must provide clear technical justification for why the propulsion failures do not represent a fleet-wide issue. NASA, in turn, must demonstrate that it is independently validating those claims rather than relying on contractor assurances. Once again, this matters because Starliner allegedly is intended to carry astronauts, allegedly, routinely. Human-rated spacecraft are certified not just on whether they work, but on how well their failure modes are understood. Unknowns are unacceptable when escape windows are measured in seconds. NASA has responded by acknowledging the panel's concerns and stating that further reviews are underway. Additional testing, data analysis, and design evaluations are expected before Starliner is cleared for future operational missions. For now, Starliner is not grounded indefinitely. I don't know why. At this point, I don't get it. But at least it is now under increased scrutiny. Now, the takeaway from the safety panel is not that Starliner is unsafe by default, which is accurate. It's just that the confidence must be earned through evidence, not through outcomes. In human spaceflight, a mission that ends safely does not mean it was safe. And I know that is a hard sentence for some to understand. It just means it ended. And NASA's challenge, once again, is to ensure that success does not silence warning signs before its next launch. And, well, here we are at the point of the show
And now, Assholes in Space!
China is asshole! China is asshole! China is asshole! China is asshole!
While Washington spent much of the year arguing about, things like budgets, oversight, and who gets blamed for what, China just keeps launching and launching and launching. In 2025, China set records for the number of orbital launches, placing more payloads into space than any other nation. Remember, SpaceX is a private entity and does not count toward the United States as a country, even though SpaceX is blowing everything else out of the water. That said, much of the activity came from the Long March rocket family, which has quietly become one of the most frequently flown launch systems on Earth. Now, this wasn't just volume for the sakes of headlines, though that was China trying to, demonstrate some of its power. It has demonstrated reusable rocket technology, stolen from SpaceX, successfully recovering stages in controlled descents, once again stealing from SpaceX, while not yet operating at SpaceX levels of routine reuse. The gap is narrowing. Reusability is no longer theoretical in China's launch program. It is, to paraphrase from Star Wars, fully operational. And it's still improving. And Alan, I would definitely take whatever book you're reading. Now, China has expanded operations around its Tianyang space station, which continues to function as a permanent crewed outpost in low Earth orbit, with regular crew rotations now occurring and cargo resupplies. Tianyang has now moved past that proof of concept and into, oh, look, there's another orbiting space station. That alone would make for a strong year. But then came the rescue. In one of the more quietly impressive moments of 2025, Chinese engineers executed a complex in-orbit rescue and recovery operation, stabilizing and managing a spacecraft that had encountered serious trouble after launch. Details were limited, as they often are coming from China, but the outcome was clear. The mission was salvaged, not lost, and don't think they will not use it against our satellites. Because yes, this matters. Quote-unquote rescue capability isn't flashy, but it can become a military weapon. It doesn't necessarily even trend well on social media unless we're warmongering like I am, telling what they can actually use it for that no one else will seem to want to talk about. That said, the ability to diagnose, adapt, and recover or destroy things when things go wrong is what separates emerging space programs from established ones. And that said, China has also continued aggressive just normal satellite deployment around allegedly just communications, ever increasing Earth observation and spying, and navigation and spying systems. I may have added the spying there, but we all know I'm right. Now, some of these are allegedly civilian, some of them are, of course, dual use, and none of them, though, are accidental. And this is where China earns its asshole segment of the show. Because China does not separate exploration from strategic advantage. I know all these years I've done it as a bit of a joke, but it's a joke that it was only funny because it's based on truth. Rockets, stations, satellites, and reuse are treated as components of national power. Transparency is an afterthought. Speed is not. And while the United States is debating whether space is a scientific commons or a strategic battlefield, it's the second, because China is here. China is behaving as if that argument was settled years ago, because to them it was. And here's a bit of uncomfortable truth about the matter. None of this happened quietly because it wasn't impressive. It happened quietly because, for the most part, outside of this program and a few others, U.S. space conversation is currently inward-facing. Budgets, oversight, risk tolerance. Oh, we hate Elon. He's going to damage a turtle. While China's is outward facing, focused on capability and momentum. Now, before you think otherwise, this does not mean China is winning space, not even remotely. It just means they are not slowing down. They are launching more, recovering hardware, operating a permanent station, and demonstrating resilience when missions are failing, despite the loss of cows. In spaceflight, those are not bragging rights. These are considered leverage. And if it's one thing any asshole in space understands very well, it's leverage. And with that, we're going to take a couple minute break here. Hope you're enjoying the show. Thank you, Al and Ordy, and anyone else who's hiding behind the scenes and not chatting tonight. I do appreciate you turning in. I know it's been a while, but I'm hoping you're digging the new studio a little bit and hope everything sounds good. We'll be back in a few.
There's a quiet in the cockpit, like louder than alarms ever were. Stars in close, but I can't touch one. Love lightens distant and blurred. Hands are shaking on the console. Breath fogs up the glass. They said I'd be fine if I followed procedure. They didn't ask how long I'd last. Get me home through the static and pain, through the black that won't let me run. There's a road through this endless rain. Lead me back to the rising sun. I don't need saving. I don't need a throne. I just need a voice to guide me home. Earth is small and the window now blue like a half-remembered dream. I learn the weight of silence up here and what goodbye really means. Sickness moves like a slow confession, written under my skin. I trade every star I ever chased for one more night back in. Get me home through the static and pain, through the dark where the hours drown. If there's still a flame in the endless rain, let it burn, don't let it go out. I don't need heaven, I don't need to know. Just say my name, and I'll find my way home. If my body quits before the ship does, don't let the signal die. Tell them I wasn't chasing glory, I was just trying to survive. If this force becomes a ghost wave, lost somewhere in the night, remember me reaching forward, not fading from the light. the dark till the long night's done. If there's a road through this endless rain, lead me back to the rising sun. I don't need saving, I don't need to be known, I just need to feel I'm going home. Fuel is low, but hope still burns. If I don't make the landing, no, my heart already returned.
And welcome back. Hope you enjoyed that. Now for the second half of the show, where we tend to go more science-y. Not always, but we try our best to split up the show in a unique and good way for everyone to be educated and entertained, at least a little. For years, one of the most intriguing assumptions about Titan has been that beneath its frozen crust lies a vast subsurface ocean of liquid water. That idea mattered because, well, liquid water, even buried deep, is considered one of the basic ingredients for life. Titan already has complex organic chemistry, methane lakes, and a very active atmosphere. If you were to add in, say an ocean, and it becomes one of the most compelling astrobiology targets in the entire solar system. But new research is now challenging this assumption. A recent analysis suggests Titan may not have a global buried ocean after all, or at least not, one scientist thought existed. The conclusion comes from re-examining gravity data, rotational behavior, and tidal responses measured during the Cassini mission. The original ocean hypothesis relied heavily on how Titan flexes under Saturn's gravity. That flexing appeared consistent with a decoupled outer shell, essentially what you would consider an icy crust floating on liquid water. But the newer models are showing these same observations can be explained by a different internal structure. Instead of a liquid ocean, Titan's interior may actually be far more rigid, with layers that deform slowly rather than slosh. In this scenario, what looks like ocean-driven movement could actually be caused by solid ice behaving plastically over geological time. And I know you're probably sitting there going, well, what? This is an important distinction. Plastic ice still moves, but not in a way that supports rabbit chemical mixing or energy transfer, two factors considered critical for habitability. Without a liquid layer, Titan's interior becomes much more how do we put this? Less likely a favorable condition for life as we currently understand it. All this does not mean Titan is suddenly, she has that wart on her neck. We can't watch that Hideaway movie again because we get stuck on that lady's neck. Titan is still kind of hot when we think about it in that way. And yes, Orty, that was meant for you. It remains the only moon in the solar system with stable liquid bodies on its surface, even if those liquids are methane and ethane rather than water. Its chemistry is still extraordinarily complex, producing organic molecules that resemble early prebiotic Earth conditions. What changes is where scientists think potential life could now exist. If there is no ocean, Titan's habitability shifts from a subsurface water model to a chemistry-driven model where life, if it exists, would have to operate in extremely cold, hydrocarbon-based environments. That would require biochemistry fundamentally different from anything we have observed on Earth. Now, this also has an implication for upcoming missions. NASA's Dragonfly mission, scheduled to explore Titan's surface and atmosphere, was designed to study chemistry rather than the search directly for life. These new findings reinforce that choice. Dragonfly is still ideally suited to answer what Titan can tell us about complex chemistry, even if the ocean hypothesis has now faded. Science advances by subtraction just as often as discovery. Sometimes the most important result is learning that something we assume to be there might not be. Titan remains strange, it remains active, it remains worth visiting, but it may not be hiding a warm ocean beneath its ice after all. And that forces us to rethink not just how we view Titan, but how easily we assume water where none may actually not exist at all. And I got through 2 out of 2 on that one. I'm happy. Astronomers have now directly observed stars in the act of consuming their planets, offering a preview of what awaits our own solar system billions and billions of years from now. The observation focuses on aging stars entering their red giant phase, a late stage of stellar evolution that occurs when a star exhausts the hydrogen fuel that it runs on. As nuclear reactions shift outward, the star expands dramatically, kind of like us middle-aged men in our 50s, sometimes hundreds of times its original size. When that happens, nearby planets can go missing. In several recent cases, astronomers have detected chemical signatures and orbital disturbances indicating that planets were swallowed by their host stars. These are not theoretical models. These are real systems caught in the act or in the immediate aftermath. The evidence comes from changes in stellar brightness, unexpected increases in certain elements like lithium, and debris signatures consistent with planetary material being absorbed into the star's outer layers. Now, I know we'll not see it in our lifetime, but this does actually matter because the Earth's sun is headed down the same evolutionary path. In roughly 5 billion years, the sun will begin to expand into a red giant. As it does this, its outer layers will push outward, engulfing Mercury and Venus, most definitely. While Earth's fate is a little less known at this time, but recent models suggest survival to be less than likely. Even if Earth avoids direct engulfment, conditions here will become uninhabitable long before that point. As the sun brightens, our surface temperatures will rise, oceans will, they'll evaporate. And the atmosphere will just simply be stripped away, much like the top upper half of that movie I was forced to watch on Vincent Charles' show. Life as we understand it will end well before the star physically reaches Earth's orbit. The planet-eating stars now being observed provide critical real-world data that improves any and all future models. They show how quickly orbital decay can occur once stellar expansion actually begins. They show how planetary material interacts with stellar envelopes. And ultimately, they confirm that planetary destruction is actually not rare. It's sort of a normal outcome of a stellar aging process. But what's particularly important in that these observations help astronomers refine timelines. Planetary engulfment may happen earlier or maybe even more violently than older models had predicted, driven now by tidal forces and drag from the star's expanding atmosphere. This research also affects how scientists think about exoplanet systems. Many stars in our galaxy are older than the sun. If planet consumption is common, then a significant number of planetary systems that once existed are already gone. What we observe today is only a snapshot in a much longer cycle of formation and destruction. Once again, none of this changes Earth's immediate future. For now, the sun is stable, its energy output is largely predictable. Humanity has no stellar deadline looming within any meaningful timeline. It's just that these events unfold over spans of time so vast they are just simply challenging intuition. But it does matter philosophically. We have to remember planets, really, they are just temporary. Ask Alderaan. Orbits are temporary. Even seemingly permanent systems have expiration dates written into their physics. The stars we look up for guidance, navigation, and meaning are not eternal caretakers. They are engines with life cycles. The facts that we can now, watch other worlds meet their end light years away means maybe, just maybe, we are beginning to understand our own place in that cycle with a clarity now in place rather than just simple myth. Earth's ultimate fate is not mysterious. It is simply a distant event yet to happen. And the universe, as always, is already showing us how eventually the Earth story will end if we were just willing to take a look at it. But there's hope. There's always hope, unless you're, on Alderaan and become a, castaway. For the first time in more than half a century, a return to the moon is no longer a vague promise or a future concept, or for you 5%ers out there, our first landing on the moon, finally. According to current planning, 2026 is the year humanity is expected to send astronauts back for the first time toward the moon, marking the first crewed lunar mission since Apollo 17 in 1972. If it wasn't brought to you by Stanley Kubrick. This return will not at all look like the Apollo missions. The mission at the center of this effort is Artemis 2, part of NASA's broader Artemis program. Artemis 2 is designed as a crewed lunar flyby. Not a landing. No idea if Uzis will be involved, but God, I hope there's one on board. 4 astronauts will travel around the moon aboard the Orion spacecraft, testing life support systems, navigation, communications, and deep space operations in real time. The goal of the mission is verification that, yes, we have been there, not some sort of spectacle. The spacecraft will be launched atop the Space Launch System, the most powerful rocket NASA has ever flown. Keyword there, NASA. Orion will then carry the crew thousands of kilometers beyond low Earth orbit, leaping around the moon before returning home. And seriously, Jared, can we turn space in the proper math? We get rid of this kilometer crap. I know it's easier for math. Just once, I'd love to see a report done from NASA that didn't use kilometers. I want freedom units, damn it. Now, the mission matters because this will restore a capability that has been absent for decades, sustained human operations beyond Earth orbit. Apollo proved it could be done. Yes, to you 5%ers, it has been done before. Artemis is meant to prove it can be done repeatedly, routinely, and for a hell of a lot less money, especially once Elon gets involved. Unlike Apollo, Artemis is structured as a long-term program. The plan includes future landings right now near the lunar South Pole, with the construction of lunar infrastructure and the use of the moon as a testing ground for technologies that will be needed to reach Mars. And of course, as we've talked about before, the South Pole is a key target because of the presence of permanently shadowed regions believed to contain water ice. That ice could be used for life support, fuel productions, and long-duration habitation, reducing dependence on supplies launched from Earth or by pirates that happen to be carrying ice. Artemis 2 itself will not land, but this is a necessary step in all of this. It validates systems that cannot be fully tested in Earth orbit, such as deep space radiation exposure. Yes, Mythbusters did a great episode on it for you people who denied that we have ever been there. Please go watch it. They will also be talking about thermal control and long-duration crew operations. That said, delays have been frequent. Technical challenges, heat shield concerns, life support testing, and integration issues have pushed timelines way past where it should have been. And these delays are frustrating, not just to me and you, the listener, to everyone involved really are probably a little pissy and upset about the whole thing. But unfortunately, they are also typical of programs operating at the edge of engineering limits. NASA's approach this time is prioritizing certification and repeatability over the speed of the missions. And it is important to remember that this distinction matters. The Apollo program was a sprint driven by geopolitical urgency. So much information was lost. Artemis can be considered a marathon driven by sustainability, done for the most part correctly. The objective is not a single flag and footprints moment, but a return that means more and a stay forever. If Artemis 2 flies in 2026 as planned, it will mark a significant turning point, not because humans touch the lunar surface again, but because the path becomes operational rather than symbolic this time. The moon will no longer be a destination remembered only through archive footage. Do you know how excited I am about having to redo the intro to this show when this moment happens again? I will be a kid in a candy store with the footage. But what it really means, it will now place humans in a state that are actively moving toward advancement again. Yes, slowly. Yes, carefully. With lessons unfortunately learned the hard way. After 50 plus years, the distance outside of a few, maybe a meter has not really changed anything. But what has changed, and I think more importantly now, is the intent. And in 2026, that intent is finally set to leave Earth with a crew aboard once more. And I cannot wait for this. But as this is our first show, not only of the new Listening Post studio, but of the new year 2026, even though I am hesitant to do any of this kind of stuff, I'm making an exception because 2025 was really an amazing year. Not personally, my year absolutely sucked all the donkey balls possible. But 2025 for space was kind of an amazing year. It was not quiet at all, and no, for for a large part, it wasn't clean either. But there were so many stories. So I'm doing my best Chinese space agency act by stealing this next segment from space.com and making it my own. Because apparently the readers over there decided to chime in on their biggest stories of the year. And I'm going to discuss some, and I would love for those in chat to participate if you think it was an actual big moment or was it overblown or whatever your opinion is. At the top of the list, according to space.com readers, were the launches. Global launch numbers reached historic highs in 2025 to the point where even I could not keep up with every single launch anymore. Driven mostly by SpaceX and China's state launch providers, and the ever-growing number of commercial and national players outside of the Blue Origin HO mission, reusability no longer became a novelty. It became, I don't know if I want to, it became expected. Rockets that failed to land were now the exception, not headlines. Of course, the Starship program dominated attention. Test flights continued. Failures were public and glorious, if I may add. Recoveries were partial and progress was incremental. And that story wasn't even success or failure, it was repetition. Starship would fly, it would break, it would fly again, break again, fly once more, and push the definition of acceptable test risk further than any other previous launch system we've ever got to enjoy in the public eye. And yes, NASA, for better or worse, remained in the spotlight, though it tended to be more indirectly. The Artemis program advanced, but not in a dramatic way. Hardware tests continued, timelines tightened, then loosened again. And yes, Artemis 2 is remaining on track for this year, keeping the dreams once more that we'll at least fly by the moon this time. But they're still not quite yet tangible. Meanwhile, James Webb Space Telescope continued to quietly redefine astronomy, and my goal is in 2026 to routinely touch on James Webb Space Telescope stories where I can, and including more video and pictures. I'm really trying to hit the end of phase 8 of my plan at its fullest with this program in particular. Webb delivered way deeper galaxy surveys, clearer exoplanet atmospheric data, and more refined stellar evolution models. But in truth, you could say it did not really generate anything spectacular. It just generated precision, which in itself can be boring to some. Planetary science also had a strong year. Mars missions continued long-term operations, sample returning, all the plans that involve around that evolved, even as costs did unfortunately rise. Asteroid missions refined our understanding of early solar system material. None of these, well, were really flashy, but all of them advanced baseline knowledge. And for better or worse, China's presence in space expanded noticeably. More launches, Tianyang operations, demonstrations of reusability, operational maturity rather than experimentation. Spaceflight has stayed steady but constrained. We also had the ISS for all its current state, despite the opening story. It continued operations despite aging hardware and growing maintenance demands. Commercial crew flights have become routine there. That normalcy, once unimaginable, faded into background noise. Hell, we had non-governmental connections to the ISS this year. And this is what reliability actually looks like and should be celebrated. Across all of this, one theme seemed to dominate some of the reader interest: momentum. But let's not leave out that exploration, which I think might be the biggest story in my heart, is no longer the exclusive domain of governments. Yes, I know it is not fully commercial either, and let's face it, right now there's only one commercial entity that is really doing it properly, but I hope to have more coverage of Firefly Aerospace launches soon. You know why? It exists in an overlapping zone where state priorities, private capital, and strategic competition are now intersecting. We have to remember that reusable rockets have lowered cost, but at the same time, somehow has managed to raise expectations. Programs that move slowly now face pressure not just from budgets, but from comparison. The question is no longer, can this be done? It has actually shifted to this question: why is it taking so long? That said, human spaceflight has to remain conservative by necessity. Safety culture, certification requirements, and political oversight, yes, they slow the progress. But the first two at least prevent catastrophic results. Political oversight, well, that probably causes more, but that's a different story. That tension was visible throughout the year, particularly in programs like Starliner and Artemis, where some technical caution collided with public impatience. But we do have some science that's moved forward, like I said, with Webb's results with planetary missions, the exoplanet research showed that most transformative discoveries often arrive without any sort of countdown clock that we can be sitting there waiting for. They often arrive after the fact through accumulated data, not single moments. Now, of course, we cannot leave 2025 without talking some of the failures. Some of the stuff that when I started this show as a fun little project with EP to give him some education during the school lockdowns, that we were told were coming, that ray of hope. At the end of 2025, there's still no Mars landing by humans. There's no permanent lunar base. There's been no real sudden discovery of life. Just systems being tested again and again, infrastructure being extended, capabilities reinforced. Now, part of that is, yes, that's just mature spacefaring phase. That's just what it looks like. But at its core, there is less awe. There is just simply the logistics. And people are looking at the heavens again and our ability to try to reach out and grab them and explore them with a new enthusiasm that, outside of a few things, 2025 did fail to bring us. But that doesn't mean 2026 is to be looked down upon as, oh, we're not going to do it this year either. There's still many hurdles, but you know, there is that hope of 2026 that all the failures, all the mundane aspects of 2025 will lead to incredible things. And I cannot wait for those headlines. Now, as we power down the transmitters in the new studio and let the universe have maybe its little last word, let's take a look at what's waiting overhead over the next couple of weeks. If you step outside shortly after sunset, the winter sky is already well established. And on those few days, if you live in Vermont, where you can actually see the sky because it's, somehow miraculously not snowing or raining, you can look toward the southeast and you'll find Orion rising confidently as the night deepens. The three stars of Orion's belt form a straight, unmistakable line. Below the belt hangs a sword, and within it, if skies are dark enough, you can spot the faint glow of the Orion Nebula, a stellar nursery more than 1,000 light years away, still forming stars as we speak. Now, high above Orion, Taurus marks the region of the sky where the sun once stood thousands of years ago. If you follow Orion's belt upward and to the right, you'll land near the Pleiades star cluster, a tight group of blue-white stars that almost look like a smudge until you realize it isn't. They're further away than they look and closer together than they appear. The moon will be moving through its phases over the coming nights, which means timing matters. Early evening skies will be darker, closer to the new moon, making this a very good window of opportunity for constellation spotting and Milky Way viewing, and maybe, just maybe, resigning and giving Carter that kiss she so desperately needs. Later in the night, Jupiter remains hard to miss, bright, steady, and unmistakably not twinkling. With even a modest pair of binoculars, it will show its four largest moons shifting position from night to night. What you are watching is gravity at work in real time. And if you're up before dawn, why? The eastern horizon offers quieter rewards. The sky thins, the stars sharpen, and the sense of depth increases. These are the hours when the universe feels less like a dome and more like a direction. There's really no special equipment that is required, no apps that are necessary, just patience and a few moments of stillness. Because in the end, the sky hasn't changed because of any of our arguments or even any of our launches, or probably even depending on what timeline we are currently on. It's still there, it's still turning, and it's still waiting to be noticed. And that's the signal worth ending on as we await to see what 2026 will hold. So that's it for tonight's transmission. Thank you for tuning in whenever and however and whyever you do. Special thanks to NASA, SpaceX, Space.com, Ars Technica, NASA Spaceflight, Popular Mechanics, and everyone out there keeping humanity's eyes on the stars. With me at the helm and the executive producer plotting our next course, we will have the ship's computer in the back whispering star maps through the static to get us to our next destination. This has been the Lost Wanderer podcast. Until next orbit, I hope you enjoyed the show, learned a little something, and maybe had a laugh or two as well. Good night.
The universe is a pretty big place. It's bigger than anything anyone has ever dreamed of before. So if it's just us, seems like an awful waste of space.